just to review quickly, sous vide cooking is really interesting. Back in the old days, our only real choice was you take a cold piece of steak or fish or whatever, put it on a hot grill, go and burn the outside. The inside's going to be dead raw, and you're going to have two little strips that are kind of in the right neighborhood. No, 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 no. Whole new paradigm. Instead, what you want to do is you take your cold piece of steak or whatever, put it in a Ziploc bag. You want to get the air out. There's a couple of ways of doing it. One is like that, and you just put it against four. The other is you leave it open, let the pressure of the water push the air out, close it up, clip it on, let it sit there for a while. Rule of thumb is typically maybe an hour per inch of product. So that's a couple of inches thick, so a couple of hours later, that in theory would be ready to go. For tougher pieces of beef, I've been known to let them go for 2 or 3 days. They come out really great. So that's the quick review. You just set your temperature to whatever you want, put the product in the bag, drop it in. Done deal, easy, you pull it out, it's fabulous. You can't overcook it because it will gently come to the ideal temperature, in this case 138 degrees Fahrenheit, and just stay there. It can't overcook, it can't go to 160 degrees because the environment's 138 degrees. So that temperature varies depending on the product. Highly recommend you experiment with your own products to find out what you like best. For example, salmon I like at 125 degrees, which is about the temperature of hot tap water. That's about 125 degrees. Chicken, you want to cook probably a little more than that. The standard is 165 for dark meat, 160 for light meat. But again, you know, look it up on the web. There's lots on the web about this. Try it for yourself and hope that you enjoy. One of the things we'd like to talk about today are some of the options that are available for you to make sous vide cooking even better. A friend of mine observed that, yes, he could learn all the trade skills that he wants by experiencing it for 40 years, or he could go to trade school for 2 years and expedite the whole process. So you'll probably figure out all the things I'm going to tell you today over time, but just to help move things along, I'd like to give you some shortcuts, some things I've learned that will hopefully make your experience even better. One of the questions we get is, are there alternatives to plastic bags? Oh, by the way, we've mentioned before, the brand name does matter, not because I have stock in the company, but because we know the chemistry of Ziploc plastic bags. And the fact that they're freezer bags means they're heavier. We know they work. Other brands might work, I just don't know the chemistry of them. One of the questions we get is there an alternative to using plastic bags? And the answer is yes. Actually, there are a few different ways of doing it. One of which is using silicone bags. They look like this. Actually, when they're new, they look like this. These are made by SIO Chef. One of the downsides on these is, if you're OCD about cleanliness, is that they tend to stain over time, which, as it turns out, isn't that big a deal, it seems, because, well, if I can't get it off with hydrogen peroxide or lemon juice or vinegar, that's probably not going to come off on your food. So these are actually a fairly clever design. You'll notice that they're not straight down. They're kind of bagged at the bottom. The food tends to sit in those nicely, and you just clip them on the side. You notice that they're open at the top, that you don't ziplock them. So when you drop them in, you just need to make sure that you don't drop them below the water line, which is not a big deal. You just need to be a little careful. So virtually all these, there are other companies that make these guys. I just happen to be using these, and they work. There are other ways of doing the plastic bag game. One of the challenges, if you're doing something really long, like a tenderloin or a whole pork loin, the obvious solution is you cut it in smaller pieces and you put it in multiple bags. Well, if you really, for show purposes or whatever, I've done shows that we really want to show off a whole pork loin. what you can do is get, you know, a freezer system like this, which have rolls of bags. And as long as your product is less than 16 foot, you're good to go.
How big?
16 foot is the limit in these bags. Yeah, this is 11 inches by 16 feet. So, unless you're doing something.
A very large eel.
Very large eel, something. It's fairly straightforward. You know, you open it up. There's a little heating unit here. You zap it and you've closed the one end of the bag. Recommend doing it twice, actually, so that just in case it fails. Put down, heat it, move it, heat it again. Put your product in. This is actually the vacuum part. Turn it around. Push the button that says vacuum. It sucks all the air out of it, and then it seals it. And again, recommend moving it and sealing it again. You know, again, if you need to do something that's really long, it works. But for me, it's just a whole lot easier just throwing them in one of the bags. As our friends at PETA are trying to teach us, we're using new, more politically acceptable phrases like, instead of there's multiple ways to skin a cat, there's now multiple ways to peeling a potato. So, with that, there's multiple ways of sous videing food. To start with, people ask, doesn't matter which sous vide circulator we use. Well, to my experience, they're all essentially the same. These circulators are all water heaters, water circulators, and extremely accurate thermometers down to about 1/10 of a degree. If you open up any of these, they all look like that. So, given that, you might want to look at price. This is the first one. When these first came out, they were $1,250 a shot. It was a very happy day when a friend of mine informed me that they were now available for $200. I went out and bought this guy and was very happy with it, and I'm still very happy with it. Works great. Then they came out with things like this, which are like about $100 or so, and I was even happier. Now they've come out with these that are in the $50 range, and they all have advantages, they all have disadvantages. User interfaces are slightly different. Some have higher temperature capabilities, others less wattage, 1000 watts, 800 watts. So it turns out it doesn't really matter. One of the big things is Wi-Fi connections. Some people like to be able to turn them on at a distance. That doesn't buy me much. I spend my life in my kitchen, but that's another deal. The main point is, to me, as long as they heat the water to an accurate temperature, that's all that really matters. One of the differences is actually that the least expensive one has an advantage of being really quiet. This guy's been running behind me here, can hardly hear it, which is not normally a big deal unless you're running it for like 3 days at a shot and it's in your bedroom. You really want it to be quiet. You know, you can put these things anywhere. I put them down my workbench if it's going for 3 days because I just don't want to take up space in my small but evolving kitchen. Other options, again, the whole deal here is precision cooking. So, one of the downsides of the circulator systems is that there are two main downsides. One is it takes water. Two is you need to use plastic bags. I guess the third is that it doesn't brown. So, some clever folks came up with ideas like the cinder cooker here, which is jokingly referred to as the $500 George Foreman grill. It's handy in as much as, yes, it is really accurate. It's good, just like the circulators, down to about 1/10 of a degree. Yes, it actually has some other features, one of which being that it actually weighs the product and monitors the temperature. So you can put a hamburger on there, say you want meat cooked medium rare, walk away, it will beep when it's done. It actually has 2 different plates, so it heats from top and bottom. But at $500 a shot, one of the other downsides is that it has very limited capabilities. If it's just one person or even 2 people, you know, you can put, they do great omelets. but it doesn't have a lot of volume. These guys, if you want to do a half a steer, put in your bathtub, doesn't matter. This is obviously very limited volume. There are other choices. Instapots are one of the new things coming on. I haven't actually tested those. I've been making a minor career out of them, but I still need to decide which one I'm going to go with or which ones I'm going to go with. Stay tuned, maybe a future episode on those. One of the options that works for us is for higher volume things, very accurate ovens. This is a combi oven. It's made to both steam and to be very precise. Not sure it's quite as exactly precise as the circulators. I don't know they're good to a tenth of a degree, but Wolf is very famous for being universal within a degree, any place within the oven. It can obviously do much larger things. I've done full turkeys in here, and they also have the advantage it can brown. It also doesn't use water. You also don't need to use the plastic bags. But at $4,000, it's not an option for every budget. One of the things that, again, sous vide is not good at is browning. While cinder cooker can be cranked to a sear temperature, it does take a while to get there, and yeah, it's okay. I actually have two of these, one that I use for doing the cooking itself and the other I use for searing, but quite frankly, a pan works really great for just that last minute sear if you like. Or if you want to do nice crispy things like fried chicken, sous vides are great for that, to bring it to temperature so the whole thing is fully cooked, top to bottom, front to back. It is at 165 degrees temperature, but it doesn't have that nice crisp to it. So a solution that a lot of people, including myself, use are things like this. These guys are on, there are many different makes and models of them. This is called an air fryer, and the idea is quite simple. You take whatever you want to crisp up, be it chicken or french fries or whatever. You put it in here, you put just a small amount, like a quarter teaspoon of oil or butter or whatever on them. Some people don't put any fat whatsoever. There's a big fan up here. You turn it to 400 degrees. It aerosolizes the oil. So it will spread a microscopic layer of that oil across whatever you're wanting to crisp up. Makes it nice and crispy. Pull it out. Best of both worlds. You've got it fully cooked before it goes in. You get crisp up when it comes out of this. Life is good. So that's sort of a winning combination for me most of the time, is a circulator and an air fryer. So those are a few tricks. There are other sous vide systems out. There's one called Mellow, which has the advantage of actually cooling your food. So for example, you're doing a thin piece of salmon, you want it done when you walk through the door. It actually is clever enough to weigh the water that you put in and actually cools it down to 40 degrees until it's triggered to go up, at which point it heats the water, cooks your salmon, you walk through the door, dinner's ready, life is good. One of the other questions, that actually brings up one of the other questions I get asked sometimes is, can you go straight from a freezer to the sous vide circulator? And the answer is yes. When I buy a pork loin, there's just two of us, myself and my wife, they're huge. It's way more pork than I'm even going to eat at one sitting. So what I'll do is I'll chop it into 4 or 5 segments, put it in a Ziploc bag, stick it in the freezer. When I want to have pork, we take one of those frozen pieces of pork loin out, pop it in the sous vide circulator, and let it rip for a few hours. It will not only bring it out of its frozen state, but bring it up to temperature. It's a wonderful thing. So that's another trick you'll find useful. One of the challenges that you'll probably run into sooner or later is products floating. If you have something that is not as dense as dense enough to make it sink into the water. You can take spoons, wash them thoroughly, both the handles and the spoony part, put them in a Ziploc bag, and these will act as sinkers, so they will keep the food from floating to the top, and that's a good thing. You want to keep the product that you're cooking at or below water level during its entire process. So that's another trick I hope you find useful. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Pause. As you
Yeah, there we go.
Jim, what about reheating something?
Great question. Reheating is definitely an option with sous vide cooking. One of the nice things to do is you take your product, you cook it thoroughly, you can sear it if you like to get that nice browning on it, and then put it in the fridge and let it sit there for a day or whatever. Or if you're going over to guests, going over to someone else for a potluck dinner or whatever, you can take your product with you, your salmon, your steak, your beef, whatever. Take it over and with a thermometer bring it up to the original temperature, for example 138. One of the things I'd recommend doing during this is investing in a good thermocouple thermometer like this. They make many different brands. They're good to 1/10 of a degree. It'll make your life easier. So yes, reheating is great either at your home or if you want to take it somewhere else.
Jim, I remember during that I've seen you use dry rubs
Yep.
on some of the things you've done.
Yep.
And before you put them into sous vide.
Yep.
What about marinades of various kinds?
Absolutely one of the great things you can do with sous vide cooking. One of the concerns when this first came out was the fact that marinades, by definition, have acid in them. Acid with plastic, temperature, close proximity, long term, made me a little hesitant, especially when the price tag was $1,250. But now that they're becoming mainstream, I've actually talked to Chef Thomas Keller about this, and I've actually emailed him, and he's pointed out that with the chemistry of Ziploc bags and now with the chemistry of silicone bags, marinades are just fine. One piece of advice is to go lighter on it than you might because they will be exposed for a longer period of time. So if you get the lower cost piece of beef and you sous vide it for an extended 2 or 3 days, you probably don't want to overwhelm it with a stronger marinade. Actually that brings back to the permanent bags. I've had questions, and I've actually written Paul, the inventor of these bags, and he's a very responsive, nice guy, about whether there have been any endorsements for the bags to make sure that they're all up to snuff and they meet the promise of not having any chemical interaction. He's actually talked to me, and he's told me that the nice chefs at Google actually use these things. They're pretty smart people, and they're surrounded by pretty smart people, and I suspect with them knowing their chemistry, that's pretty good. But also, these guys are made out of silicon, and they're good at very high temperature. I've used this guy for many years now, and there's no degradation. So I'm pretty confident that those bags are in fact permanent and would work with marinades and other products. So I'm happy with those.
Jim, this is the random shot in the dark.
Oh, goody. Love those.
Is there anything you can think of that you can really effectively only use sous vide on?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Chocolate. Chocolate is one of those things that is very, very temperature sensitive, and if you're off by a few degrees, it goes from being nice tempered chocolate to not so much. Also, pasteurizing eggs. I've actually, before sous vide became a thing, went through the pains of pasteurizing eggs without a sous vide, and it was a royal pain. For 45 minutes, I carefully sat over the pot and drilled in slightly warmer water, slightly cooler water, just to keep it at exactly the right temperature for 45 minutes, and it was a pain. Now with sous vide, you just set it to the temperature, drop in a dozen eggs, they become pasteurized, and you can use it for things like making mayonnaise or making Caesar salad, or things that you want quote-unquote raw eggs, but you don't want to have the risk of salmonella and other bad things.
Okay, so for me being kind of like a family cook, not knowing much about this.
Oh, you know lots.
What?
Watch the show, you'll know even more.
But what temperature do you need for pasteurizing eggs?
There's this great thing called Google, and I highly recommend you go out and check it out. You go www.google.com and put in the words sous vide pasteurized eggs, and it will tell you whatever you want to know. It's my auxiliary brain, and I don't keep those things in memory. I think it's 119
I'm ashamed.
degrees.
I'm shocked. I'm just shocked.
You'll get over it.
But you pasteurize it at this temperature for 45 minutes, and the
Yes.
eggs doesn't become solidified.
No, actually, I think they look a little different. Let's see, I've got some in here. I don't think I've used all my pasteurized eggs. Oh, there's one. So they become a little cloudy, but other than that, I'll just wash off my eggs. So this one is pasteurized, and as you can see, they're a little bit cloudy, but you can scramble those, you can poach them, you can do whatever you would with a normal egg. In fact, that will be my breakfast in a little bit, as opposed to the more clear eggs, but they work. Thanks for your questions. So, thanks for watching today. If you have any questions, please feel free to write me at jim@chefjim.com. Let's try that again. Thanks for watching today. If you have any questions, please feel free to write me at jim@chefjimyoakum.com. Hope you enjoy, hope this helps, and hope you enjoy cooking. Bye for now.